G'day guys, it's Tim Guest here. Today we're talking about the biggest mistakes that property investors make. Now as we go through the Facebook Live, I'd love for you guys to interact with the post. So, if you like what I'm saying, click the like button. If you love what I'm saying, click the like button. If you don't like it, click the angry button. And of course, please post your comments if you have any questions as we go through. But look, some shocking stats that came out about property investors from the ABS not that long ago. 75% of investors only own one. That's 3 out of 4 investors only owning one investment property. Now, the thing that stands out for me is this. One investment property is never really going to get you to your goals. So if people are investing in property and they're only getting to one, then really they're failing when it comes to reaching their financial goals. So the thing that we want to address today and start to look at is how come people only own one? How come, and the other stat that came out was that 50% of investors that only have one will sell that property investment within the first 7 years. Now, of course, you don't need me to tell you that property investment is a long-term investment strategy. And if you're selling your property inside the first 7 years, then you're not even really starting to realise the full gains that you can get. So, in terms of talking about the biggest mistakes that most property investors make, one of the things that we need to address is probably the 4 most common property investing strategies. Okay, and this is really where people fall down because primarily, just like people are taught about debt, about home ownership, about savings, about tax, the reason why most of us fail financially is primarily because simply what we're taught about those things is wrong. Same thing applies when it comes to property investing. What most people are taught about property investing is flawed and in some cases completely sometimes backwards. So to highlight this, what we're going to do is walk through those 4 most common property investment strategies that people are using. So number 1, buy an old house on a big block, probably that is something like 10 k's from the CBD. And what we're after, g'day Alana, welcome to the Facebook Live. What we're after here is getting an old house that's on a big block that's either subdividable now or will potentially be subdividable in the future. And the thinking behind this is that people owning that kind of property are going to get superior capital growth than what they might get in other properties, right? So whenever we're looking at any investment strategy, there are 3 things that we need to take into consideration. These 3 things are this. I did a quick PowerPoint, right? Capital growth. Okay, obviously how much the property is going to go up in value over time. The other thing is cash flow. How much is it costing you or how much are you making from that property investment each week? And the third thing, and this is the one that most people fail to ever consider, is the risks associated. So now, bringing these 3 back and looking at it from this approach that most people are looking at, buying an old house on a big block. Okay, so like I said, the thing that most people are after when it comes to this property investment strategy is the capital growth that they can secure by owning a home that's either subdividable now or got subdividable potential. Okay, what a lot of people miss about this particular strategy though is that their cash flow is going to be very heavy negatively geared. Okay, so you're talking an older house, you're going to get less rent. That means it's going to cost you more out of your back pocket every single week. You're also missing out on the depreciation benefits that are associated with property investment, right? Once again, that's going to relate to more money out of your back pocket every single week. And you're going to have much higher maintenance costs on a property like that. So this is one of the reasons why people will at the most ever get to only one, because it's costing them a lot out of their back pocket. And then of course they can't afford to go and buy another one. Okay. Also, it leads into why people will often sell these properties within the first 7 years is because they get fatigued. Okay, they get sick of paying out a couple $100 every single week to hold this particular property, and they just finally decide that they're going to sell the property. Okay, in terms of the risk, buying that old house on the old block, just holding on to it, apart from what we discussed about the capital growth and cash flow, not a lot of risk is associated. But where the risk does come in is that most people, and particularly a lot of mums and dads now, are actually hoping to become budding developers. They're hoping that what they're going to be able to do with this property is once it's either subdividable or once they've got enough equity in the property that they then go and subdivide it. And this is where a lot of the risk comes in. Firstly, in the bottom end of the market where you've got things like 2, 3, 4 lot subdivisions, okay? There's just so much competition. Like I said, a lot of mum and dads are involved in that market. So what the competition has done is it's eaten into the margins that people can often secure by doing this kind of property investment, which means that you're not going to make a huge amount of profit by going through that process. Not only that, if you are going to develop it, you're going to be hugely negatively geared while you're going through the development. Okay, and then the other thing that comes is also the risks associated with doing that particular kind of development. So time blowouts, cost blowouts. Finance can be a real difficult thing as well. I mean, at the moment, the best LVR loan that I'm aware of for development loans is a 65% LVR, meaning that you need 35% deposit. Now, let's say it's $1 million block, $1 million development, maybe it's triplex quad, you're going to put 3 or 4 units on it or something along those lines. $2 million development, if you need 35% deposit, that means you need $700,000 worth of deposit, and at best you might be getting maybe a 10% profit, maybe a 15% profit margin at the end of the development. So the risks associated with that kind of development strategy are very, very high. Okay, so let's talk now about the second most popular investment strategy, and this is typically renovate for profit. Okay, so once again, a lot of the time that people get caught out with this is people particularly that are quite handy, they may be trades or something along those lines, and the thinking behind this strategy is either they can do a lot of the work themselves or that their mates and friends can do the work. G'day Nige, g'day Jay, thanks for joining the Facebook Live. They can do some of the work as well. So let's just talk through this, right? So the idea, once again, is about buying a dilapidated house in maybe a property that's 10 k's from the city or in a blue chip area. By going through and doing the renovation, you're adding value to that property. By adding value, you're going to make a profit margin by going through it. So a lot of people will often factor, 3 or 4 month turnaround to get this done. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that people make in this particular kind of development is they never factor in. In fact, actually, before we get into that, so once again, what people are looking for here is capital growth, adding value, okay? One of the problems that we do see, you've got, once again, high negative cash flow, particularly while you're going through the process of doing the renovation. Clearly you can't rent a property out that's going to be being renovated, so you've got that holding cost, which is very, very high. The risk, once again, is where a lot of people get caught out here. So like I said, the biggest thing that most people fail to take into consideration with this property investment strategy is they never factor in the cost of their own time. So if you're doing work, there is a cost to your time. Now, I mean, if it's trade, it's easy. You know what your hourly rate is, whether it's 30, 40 bucks an hour, whatever it is. Like, you've got to factor that into your costings, okay? Now, also keep in mind that the time that you could be spending on the weekend with your friends, family, watching the footy, whatever it is, that time has a value too, okay? So unless when you're doing the feasibilities, you're gonna factor in the cost of your own time, really the feasibilities aren't right, okay? The other thing that often gets people caught out here is being able to use, friends, family, trades, mates rates to get the property renovation done. Now, of course, people that have done this before know how this goes. I mean, say for example, you've organised for your mate Jono to come around and do the tiling on the weekend. It might get to Friday afternoon, Jono suddenly makes a phone call and says, "Oh mate, look, haven't finished the job. I can't come and do your work tomorrow. I'm gonna have to push it back. Can't do it next weekend. The missus has got me going to a wedding," or something along those lines. Next thing you know, you're getting these massive time blowouts. And of course, one of the things that builders can also really enforce on a lot of trades is that they do a top quality job. They actually have the ability to back invoice trades if they're not doing that work, right? So essentially, if Jono doesn't do a good job on doing your tiling or something along those lines, if you have a problem with that, well, that could cause a lot of problems between the friendship. It's going to be hard to get Jono back to fix the problems up, or you've got to pay someone else to come out and do it. So that's where a lot of people fall into this particular trap with this particular strategy. And look, I know quite a lot of people. I mean, I've even done this strategy myself, okay? Certainly didn't work out for me. I'm certainly never doing it again. But in terms of other people's feedback when trying to implement this kind of strategy, the most common thing that I hear is this: "Hey, yeah, we made some money and it wasn't really worth it," okay? So now let's talk about the third most common investment strategy. I probably don't need to talk about this in too much depth, just because a lot of you are going to know about this right now. So this is typically positively geared investment strategies. Now, normally what people are targeting here is regional or resource-based towns, okay? And what you can secure in those kind of areas, if you time it right, and that's the big key, if you time it right, you can secure good capital growth. You can also get great cash flow, okay? In fact, in a lot of these resource-based towns, people will pay you a hell of a lot more to rent a property than what they would to own that property. Once again, the killer here is risk, okay? So, for people watching in Western Australia, I probably don't need to talk too much about this, right? Because you might be familiar with what happened in places like Newman, Karratha, Port Hedland. I know of he's now a client of ours, wasn't a client at the time, but bought a house up in, I think it was Newman, paid $550,000 for it, and was getting $1,300 a week rent. I mean, that's hugely positively geared, okay? Within an 18-month period, that $550,000 house went up to $750,000. He made $200,000 in 18 months. That's a really good profit, okay? Rent stayed the same, okay? But then what happened? The bottom fell out of the mining boom, okay? That same property is now worth $275,000. It's worth half of what he paid for it. And rather than getting $1,300 a week rent, he can only rent that property out for $350 a week. Now, you want to think about it like this: if I took $1,000 a week out of your investment strategy, how would you go? And the answer for most people, quite simply, is you'd probably be bankrupt right now. So while you can secure those high capital growths and that high cash flow return, it is a very, very risky strategy, and it's typically best suited to high net worth individuals that can take that hit if they don't time it right and they get done. Lots and lots of people are in a lot of trouble right now because because they've tried to adopt those strategies. Fourth strategy, fourth most common investment strategy I see out there is apartments. Okay, and primarily what people here are trying to take advantage of is kind of the best of all these different strategies. So when you've got an apartment, typically apartments have higher yields, meaning that they have a higher percentage of rent than what you might get normally for a house. So you're getting good rents, okay? It means less money out of your back pocket. Also an apartment, it's primarily building, meaning that you're getting a lot of depreciation benefit out of it as well. Okay, once again, it means that it's cheap to run from an investment point of view. From a cash flow point of view, you're normally talking maybe a little positive, maybe neutral, or maybe just fractionally negative. Okay, that's why a lot of people are attracted to these kinds of strategies. Apartments, look, one of the things you've got to watch with apartments is they make up the smallest sector of the market. I mean, here in Perth, just because I know the stats off the top of my head, apartments make up 10% of the market as compared to 3x2s and 4x2s, which make up around about 50% of the market. So from a resale point of view, if you're going to be buying in one section of the market, you want to be buying in that 3x2, 4x2 section and not in the apartments. All that means is that that sector is subject to a lot of fluctuation, okay? So you might get an undersupply, high demand, you get good growth, okay? But then typically once you go through good growth areas, that's when developers all switch on their taps, right? They all start developing. You see a huge amount of stock then hit the market. We have an oversupply in the market. And then of course we see rents and values drop, okay? Now, on average, over time, you do see roughly the similar to same kind of growth as what you will see in a house. The difference is the fluctuation, which can really cause people problems. I remember the first apartment building that I moved into, overlooking the river. It was a brand new luxury apartment development. It took 3 years to sell or rent all of those properties. Now, of course, most people just couldn't stomach having an investment property with no tenant for 3 years. So that's in terms of the risk with the fluctuation, okay? So essentially what I've covered there is the 4 most popular property investment strategies. And this is primarily what accounts for why 75% of investors only own one. These strategies can work out for people. I'm not saying that these strategies are bad or anything along those lines, but typically people fail to pick the strategy which is actually going to be best suited to their individual situation. That's one of the most important things. The second thing is this, is that there's actually a couple of other property investment strategies out there which will secure you solid, consistent capital growth. It'll be neutral, you know, maybe fractionally negatively geared. I mean, many of the strategies that we show our clients, it might cost people $15 a week. Okay, there's not too many people out there that couldn't afford to own an investment property knowing that it's only costing them $15 a week. And the most important thing of all, and this is particularly because we specialise in working with everyday hardworking Aussies, you don't take on all the risks that's associated with the other investment strategies. And this is the most important part. When you've got a long-term investing strategy, what you're looking to do is to buy a property, something that's going to consistently grow, something that's going to keep you away, mitigate, minimise, stay away from all the risks associated with property investment, which allow you to hold something that's very affordable and just hold it for a long period of time. You hold on to a property for 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to double, triple in value. And that is how you reach financial goals. So that's something we're going to go through tonight, guys. Wanted to cover those 4 top investment strategies. Now, of course, if there's something that interests you and you want to find out more about what strategy is actually going to be best suited for you, or some of those lesser known strategies that are a lot less risky, a lot more affordable and produce the same kind of performance, then you should definitely get in contact with us and let us know, and we can sit down, look at your situation and start making some recommendations about what's actually going to be best for you. But guys, thanks a lot for tuning in today. I hope it's been really valuable for you. Love to hear your comments down the bottom. Make sure you like the Facebook page. And if you haven't been along to one of our events, make sure you get along to one of our events. You can just check into the website there. Thanks for being with me, guys. Have a great night, and I will speak to you soon.